the Prime Minister has blown our margin. He's spent the cupboard bare before this crisis even happened, and now he's maxing out our national credit card.
Opposition critics slammed the federal government's fall economic statement as reckless spending without a plan. But some economists say the case is overblown and pandemic spending in Canada may not trigger the same sorts of economic crises we've seen in the past.
In 1996, when we had a debt crisis, during which the government couldn't even raise debt on international markets, our debt to GDP ratio was 66%, only 10 points higher than it's projected to be next year. And we are moving very quickly to add more. We're not over the cliff yet, but the government is running quickly towards it.
Concern about Canada's deficit spending has coalesced around fears that government spending will trigger an economic crisis like that seen in 1995, where the cost of debt payments hit 6% of Canada's GDP.
The credit card analogy just doesn't make sense when you have your own central bank, your own capacity to create your money. How many households can make their own money?
Marc-André Pigeon says Canada needs to rethink the way we talk about national debt. Pigeon says inflation is always a risk in economic policy, but is happy the fall economic statement says inflation will be a guardrail against overspending.
The question around the appropriate size of the deficit and the related concepts of debt to GDP ratio is what's the inflationary risk here? Do we see an inflationary risk? If you look at the fall economic statement just released the other day, the projections for inflation are more of the same, basically 2% or less.
The federal Liberals have batted away concerns about deficit spending. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says much of the new debt is locked in at low interest rates and won't come to maturity for decades. The Prime Minister agrees, saying the risk right now isn't spending too much, but spending too little.
As we've seen in recommendations from the International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, from global financial institutions who've said, do not make the same mistakes that were made by many countries, including by this country under the previous government, of turning off the taps too quickly after a recession. In the 2008-2009 recession, spending was scaled back too quickly, and that austerity hurt Canadians.
Meanwhile, the PM also addressed some of the concerns about Canada's place in line when it comes to COVID vaccines. Justin Trudeau says we're guaranteed to get some of the first doses of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine, pending Health Canada approval. In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.